to talk about Ron DeSantis' fascist paradise, a.k.a. Florida. This is truly problematic, substantially problematic. I don't know how to say it beyond that. I mean, we've got now teachers in Florida who are having to pull books off the shelves because they're literally facing felony charges. This story from The Independent this morning, I think, kind of lays it all out. Andrea Phillips, they write, a Florida teacher for more than a decade, started her day on Wednesday, this was last week, with an act that went against every instinct she has as an educator. Following orders issued by her school district, she removed dozens of non-curriculum books from her classroom, stripping the shelves bare. The new guidelines issued by Duval County Public Schools earlier that day require teachers to remove all books that do not appear on the state-approved reading list pending a review by a, quote, media specialist. She said, I've never seen anything like it. She said, it feels cold without all my books. It doesn't feel like the classroom and the environment that I built. But, you know, the legislature in Florida, Republicans in the legislature in Florida, collaborating with Ron DeSanctimonious, put together a law that was passed in March of last year that, you know, in addition to don't say gay, now you've also got don't say black. And between these two laws, any book in the Florida public schools that talks about issues of blackness, issues of race, or that talks about gender identity or, you know, issues having to do with LGBTQ Americans have to be removed from the bookshelves. I would remind you that this was one of the very first things the Nazis did in the 1930s. They purged the schools of books written by Jewish authors. And then after that, they went in and started purging public libraries and holding large public event book burnings that literally thousands of people would come to and applaud and bring their own books to throw onto the fires. This is dangerous not just because of what it is, but because of how contagious it is. And we know this from the experience of Germany and Italy in the 1930s and 1920s, respectively. And in addition to DeSantis and the law, now there are these organized groups, at least one of them funded in part by right-wing Michigan billionaires, and billionaires from other parts of the country as well, but Michigan billionaires that appear to be connected to the DeVos family. These, like the Moms for Liberty group and other groups that are encouraging their people to show up at school board meetings all across the country. They're passing out pamphlets and things claiming that there's pornography in our books. In one meeting that was described in the media this morning, they came to a school board meeting and passed out, quote, pornographic excerpts from the books that they want banned to all the children. Oh, yes, this pornography is so terrible the children can't see it. Here, kid, have some. And these people are not really concerned about the children. Fascism always uses children as its excuse to be fascism. This is just pure, plain and simple, good old-fashioned fascism. And, I think we need to be calling it out for what it is. This has nothing to do with protecting children. There is nothing in any of these books that any of these school children, any child old enough to read, is also old enough to go on the internet and not only find any of these books or read their Kindle versions online or download the Audible book on tape of any of them, but also to go to the porn sites on the internet. I mean, if these people were seriously, and I ranted about this last week, that we need a .xxx domain for the internet so that, that requires a credit card to get into. so that, you know, children don't have such easy access to porn. I realize it's not going to stop anything. You know, my dad didn't collect Playboys, but my best friend's dad did when I was 8 years old. I mean, you know, kids will find a way, right? But the point is that if these people had a genuine concern about their children being exposed to pornography, they would not be yelling and screaming about Catcher in the Rye being in the school library. But they don't have a genuine concern about that. This is not about, you know, we're concerned about the children seeing or reading bad things. This is that they are concerned about the children learning the actual history of America. They are concerned about the children learning the actual history of fascism around the world. They're concerned about the children learning the history of right-wing populist movements that in case after case after case have led to mass murder. And they don't want kids to know this. They want to raise a generation of kids who are as blissfully ignorant of these things as, frankly, I was going to school in elementary school in the 1950s. I mean, you know, most of us old farts learned this stuff well into our adulthood. And we should have, frankly, learned it in school. We would have a better understanding of America. We would have been, you know, better prepared to deal with and interact with and understand what was going on in the civil rights movement and in the gay rights movement, the women's rights movement. But all of those things, the history of the women's movement, the history of the gay movement, or you know, what's now called LGBTQ movement, the history of the civil rights movement, the history of Hispanic farm workers and Cesar Chavez, all of that was missing from our school books in the 1950s. And that's what these guys want to take us back to. They want to take us back to pre-1954, before the Brown versus Board decision, before schools were integrated, when all white schools were the only, you know, public schools of any value that provided good education. I realized there were a lot of good black teachers who were desperately trying to teach black kids in all black schools and doing their very best, but they were so under-resourced. But they want to take us back to a time when our schools are segregated, and the white kids learn absolutely nothing about this so that they can grow up to be just as bigoted and fascist and homophobic as their parents. Is society going to tolerate this? I think that, you know, maybe I'm wrong. I have been wrong many times in my life. I've been wrong about politics. But I believe that this is going to backfire on Ron DeSantis. It may well get him the Republican nomination for president, although I don't think it's going to. I think, frankly, the guy who is, at this moment, most likely to be the Republican nominee is Brian Kemp of Georgia. But that's a whole nother conversation. I mean, he's positioning himself like Mitt Romney, but he's got the wink nod of the racist past in Georgia, which is exactly what, you know, Richard Nixon was doing, exactly what Ronald Reagan was doing. I'm just a moderate. Oh, but we've got to deal with these criminals, all these drug crimes, and it was wink, wink, nod, nod. Deal with the black people. But anyhow, this is frankly something we should not be tolerating.